Morning, George.
Good morning, Phil.
Morning,
How are you
everybody.
this morning?
Outstanding. And good morning to you, everybody. This is Saturday Morning with George and Phil. 22 minutes to help you become the best version of yourself. Whether you found yourself out of shape, struggling in a dead-end job, or even job transition, we're your hosts, George Murray and Phil Connor, to help you move from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. We're glad you can meet us early on a Saturday morning. And we do encourage questions, so please put them in the chat. We'll try to get to as many as possible. George, it's episode 17, and we're talking about passion projects today, writing a book. How are you doing today?
I am doing awesome, trying to keep dry in the Minnesota. We're actually finally getting some much deserved rain.
The ground is thirsty out there. It's been incredibly dry, and it's nice to see things both cool off and get a little bit of hydration.
I agree. So before we get started, I always like to turn around and recognize our sponsor. So if I can get my screen to work and cooperate with me, I'll try to do so. So Thrivent, they believe the money is a tool and not a goal. So I'm reading from a script because, again, I didn't prepare this morning. So we're just going to go for the flow. Driven by a higher purpose at their core, they are committed to providing financial advice, investment, insurance, banking, and generosity programs to help most of or all of them be given to their clients. Thrivent and Skip Nelson, as you've guys seen maybe a couple of times in earlier shows, being a pitch hitter for Phil when he is out and about worldwide. I suggest you reaching out to Phil. He and his team have been working more than 10 years with people in career transition. Make sure that they have a soft landing and their finances are set. All this month, the focus is really maximizing your lower tax bracket. You know, one of our opportunities when we're in career transition is we don't particularly look at our finances early on, and there's so much advantages, and the folks at Thrivent can help you be more successful.
Well, thank you for the folks at Thrivent, and it's an exciting category we're going to talk about today, George, in people's passion projects. And I know you have some experience in this area. Did you think 10, 15 years ago that you would ever write a book on the topic of job transition?
Absolutely not. I was a head down professional in business, and that would have probably been the farthest from my mind, right? Maybe going in, turning around a company, or the ways to do the best practices of doing so in a short period of time, but never in career transition or job transition.
You've done a lot of turnaround projects. What was the most interesting turnaround project that you've managed in your career?
I'd have to say, I was working for a technology company, and the CEO, after a real recent turnaround in the U.S. operations, he asked me to kind of take a look at the Thailand operations. And long story short, got in there, started a plan, and then within 3 months, we were in the worst floods in 60 years. This is back in 2010, 2009, where 6 of my factories within 24 hours were under 30 feet of water. Wow. And you just never prepare for something like that. But you know what? The team pulled through, and in the entire industrial park, just north of Bangkok, we were the first up and operational in less than 65 days.
That definitely sounds like there's a book in that experience still yet to be written, maybe.
Perhaps.
I myself have not written a book. I've started a couple, but not yet taken one across the finish line. When did you know that you were actually going to complete your book?
When I knew I was going to complete it, that was kind of a mystery. But I think with career transition, I attacked the search of how to get my book published and everything else. A great gentleman who's written many, many books, Mark LeBlanc, had given me a few minutes, and I asked him for his best advice. And he said, congratulations, out of all the people who say they're going to write a book, only 10% do. He says, but the caveat is that you're only 40% on your way to completing a book and getting it published.
What's the overall experience been for you?
I would say extremely rewarding. I never wrote the book with the intent of being a bestseller or award-winning author. I mean, I was able to do so, but that was just a byproduct. The intent is that really I wanted to help people not feel so desperate and not a roadmap that like I was in my first career transition took 13 months. And the unemployment rate is 4.3% back in 2016. You figure, well, you know what? A couple of months and I'll find a great opportunity, but it's competitive out there. You have to have a competitive edge.
And it definitely appears that the content of your book is resonating with people. I mean, there's no doubt about that. You can see all the reviews that are popping up on Amazon. And do you recommend that job seekers do everything that's in your book?
No, I mean, the book, I call it, kind of the EOS model of career transition. Gino Wickman did a great job of pulling all best practices. And like myself in the book, I tell people, I networked with a lot of people. A lot of people gave me great advice, little tidbits, and I kind of pulled them all together and I tried them. And I used the ones that worked well for me, and the ones that didn't, I tried them at least once and said, hey, it just doesn't work for me. And so it's really just taking a look at all of them and seeing what works for you.
Well, and you kind of took all the skills that you developed in your professional life and applied it to job search, right? I mean, your network when you started this was relatively small, and then you've grown your network or your meetings before you wrote your book. So how many people would you say you networked with?
In the two transitions, I would say over 1,400 people. Since 2016, it's probably been more like maybe 35 or 3,700 people.
That's a large sample of people to be able to pick their brains and did you ever think, say 10 years ago, that you would possess the professional network that you have today?
No, absolutely, and not. I was just very fortunate to meet a lot of great people early in my career transition to set me straight. We had Lenny Newman on here before. We had Greg Rise of the world. And our special guest today also helped me with his book in getting the best practices in order to land a job faster.
Why don't we bring on, you talk about our friend that has a passion for meeting and connecting with people. Let's welcome Larry Kaufman of the NCG Factor, joining us this morning with Coffee and George and Phil.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, George, Phil, and those in the audience brave to wake up to watch us today and listen to us.
Always a pleasure, Larry. I always get energized when you talk about connecting and moving your career path. One of the first questions is, and Phil asked me this, what's been the best benefit of writing the book?
I think the best benefit is the response and feedback of how it's helped people and changed their lives, where they didn't know where to start. We know so many people have gone in transition. I know things have changed because of the pandemic, but for a lot of people, it was their first time in transition. Where do they start? They didn't know where to start. A lot of people are very timid and shy, right? And how do I network and build relationships and get help to find a job? So, you've given people a roadmap with your book, George, and then I've done it as well. So I think when you get that feedback, like, Larry, this has been so helpful. I read your book. I did this and I did that in your book. I used the templates and I found a job and it made the process easier. And I just really appreciate your help. And so it's the rewarding feedback, right?
Larry, what was the passion that you had inside you that made you choose networking as the topic you were going to write about versus some other topic? Like, what was it that really was the fire that was inside you?
So I do talk about how I think back, because the book is about building life-changing relationships from college to retirement, because at all stages of our life, we need to be, I sometimes don't like the word networking. I redefined it with the NCG Factor, but I felt that we need to be building relationships in all stages of our lives. And so really why I wanted to write a book about, I guess, networking and building relationships. I was thinking back in college, I didn't do that. I don't know if you guys did, but I didn't build relationships. And I was very self-centered. You know, the goal was have as much fun, drink as much beer as possible, and study the least amount possible. And, you know, when I coach college kids today, you know, it's so different, you know, and I'm trying to help them take a different path than what I did. So I thought I could help the college kids, and I thought, well, there's people like, you know, all of us, right? At, you know, later stage career, mid stage, early stage, that could do a better job at not only networking, but building relationships, thinking about other people, and building that network where, you know, George and I were talking, you know, he found a job so quick, implemented the best practices of his book and what he's learned from people. And so, how do we help people build these relationships and best practices when something happens in our life where we need that job or need to help others? We have the network.
Larry, did you anticipate the success of the book, or did you write the book saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to be a best-selling author?
So, you know, I think some people write a book because they just want to write a book and have it there, and they put it on the shelf and they just say I've got it, and they give out dozens and dozens of those books. And some people really want to write a book that's read. And for me, it wasn't. Yeah, I didn't need to be a bestseller. But if Oprah said, Larry, I'm gonna back you. I read your book. Somehow I got a copy, and I think it's awesome, and I'm gonna promote it and publicize it. I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I wrote it to help other people, and I don't want it to be on a shelf and just to get me speaking engagements. I want people to read it, and I want people to share with other people and send it to other people. And I hear that all the time. I just bought 10 books or 20 books or 30 books or 50 books to give away at Christmas. And I wrote it so people read it and it helps people.
Larry, one of our viewers is asking, Lenny Newman asks, what advice do you have for people who are somewhat nervous about getting out there and networking?
You have to do it. You have to do it. But the great thing is, Lenny and I know, and we all know, LinkedIn's a great way to virtually network and get your start and connect with people, and start with the warmest people you know that you used to work with or went to school with, and slowly, you know, come out of your shell a little bit. And we know it's hard. We know you have to do it though. And so I think start out maybe, you know, a little virtually. Hey, the great thing is with the pandemic, it's not great, but we did, you know, get into Zoom and Teams and other platforms. And so you don't have to get out of your jammies. You know, you can be in your pajamas and have a little, you know, networking meeting with someone. Or if you're concerned, you turn your camera off and you just say, oh, my camera's not working today. So you could ease into it. But great question, Lenny, because we know Lenny's not shy at all.
Well, and Larry, you allude to a really important thing, that connecting with the terms kind of blend together a little bit. There's the electronic connection of being on a social media platform, but there's that emotional connection of actually developing a relationship. And you kind of talk a lot about that in your book. And did you find that was something that has resonated with everybody, or have you found that some people maybe don't see the value in that?
I think what it's been is it's been more eye-opening. I think I've helped people to become more self-aware how they've been networking and maybe not the best way. And so one of my presentations, I just came up with this quote, and it was, if you lead with yourself, you're going to leave with yourself. And so many in transition, they show up and throw up, right? They talk all about themselves, don't want to know what George and Phil do for a living. Most people I talk to in transition, I will say, have no idea if I'm married, divorced, never been married, kids, no kids, if I have a job, what I do, what I don't do. They don't know anything about me. We wrap up an hour call and it was all about them. And so I'm trying to coach people to learn about other people and not think only about themselves, even though they're in transition. It's really easy to do. So there's a lot of learnings, but people really, I think, are not as self-aware, and that's what I'm trying to do, is help them become more self-aware.
And also that you were very brave to take the entire family and jump in an RV and go to Yellowstone.
Like, we were talking about trips. Phil is going in an RV with his family, but they're older now. My kids were younger. I think that's braver.
So one of our viewers, Renee Roth, asks, your book mentions inner and outer circles. Could you elaborate on what comprises each and how to separate people into them?
And I appreciate you asking that, Renee. So basically, if you go into transition, and you don't have to be in transition, we should be networking and building relationships because you may need them for yourself or other people in your world. And so there's inner circles, which would be, like Lenny was saying, if someone's kind of shy, your inner circle may just be your family, right? Or maybe a couple friends, that you've had a relationship with for years from school, possibly. But what's your inner circle look like? Because when something happens or you need to help somebody else, do you have two people, five people? So I tell people define it and know who those people are because you're going to need them. And I think we could all attest if you've been in transition, the people you thought you knew the best help you the least. And the people you know the least help you the most. It's very weird. And there's some people who are exceptions. And the outer circle is, you're networking, right? And you get introduced and you should meet George or Phil or Larry or Lenny, and you didn't know those people. And then all of a sudden they're helping you immensely. And so I always tell people, I'd like to be, in your inner circle. I want to kick someone out that's not doing a good job. And it's going to keep changing. Someone in the outers and they come the inner, that person in the inner you thought was your best buddy, you're kicking them out because you just met George and you're like, oh my God, so much better than Tom and my network or Mary. So we're making some changes.
Well, just like in your book, you talked about, I think you referenced a couple of times, laying the seeds, right? And that's how I found my last opportunity in 35 days, from 0 to 1,000 miles an hour. I helped a guy who was in career transition a year ago, and timing, luck, whatever, he reaches out, and he's like, hey, I'm looking for this particular person, would you know anybody? And I'm like, hey, what about me? So you just don't know. And I always went into those meetings, how can I help you?
Those are my 5 powerful words you got to say all the time. I know you were listening, George.
Larry, the book obviously has had a lot of impact on people, but what was a major hurdle that you ran into from conception to publishing with writing a book?
I don't think it was a hurdle. It was just I was procrastinating, and I was one of those people, right? So I said I was going to write a book for a long time. I'm going to write a book, and it was just to be for college kids. And my wife's like, yeah, right. Like you say, only 10% of the people actually write a book of all those that say they're going to. And I just kept saying it, and my wife was getting frustrated with me. And so one day, not too long ago, she said, you know what? We've been investing in these small startups that you think you're going to make millions of dollars from, right? And she said, we're not, and we're wasting our time and money. Just stop doing it. Let's invest in you. And so the hurdle was me. And my wife removed that hurdle, that obstacle. And I just said, okay, I'm going to do it. And then as I went through the process and thinking through it and what I wanted to do and how I was going to do it, then I determined what I was going to write about. It wasn't going to just be about college kids networking more effectively.
Well, hey, for our viewers that started late, I just want to let them know that we are talking with Larry Kaufman, author of The NCG Factor, and we are both live on LinkedIn, on YouTube, as well as Facebook. Go ahead, Phil.
No, Larry, you brought up something that we've talked about on this show a lot, of having a board of advisors, a personal board of advisors, and you talked about how the impact your wife had in getting you on course. And I know that I can speak that there's nobody that wants to see me succeed or be successful as much as my wife does. Having that inner circle of support, how valuable was that to you in writing the book?
Well, immensely. I have to give it all to my wife. We've been married 32 years and been through everything together. And so she is my only true best advisor. Lenny, don't be upset. But basically, when I have to look to my wife because she was the person that pushed me to do it. And I'm so grateful to her. And I only wish that she was listening through Facebook or LinkedIn or another medium today to hear it, but we'll have to send her the recording. But I gave her a lot of credit in the book. But yeah, it's so important to have a support team. So if it's not your spouse, it's a friend, several people. And I think, like George, you told me, many people kept telling you should write a book. And I did hear that before, but I didn't listen to it as much as when my wife said, we got to do it now. And now's the time. Let's do it. Let's invest in you.
I love the way she said it too, is that you've been investing in other people and helping. It's time to invest in yourself, invest in us.
That's great.
And I think so many people out there just don't think they're an expert. So I guess the one last question I would have is, what would you say to somebody like that thinks, I could write a book, but I haven't climbed Mount Everest. I haven't invented some great new product in the marketplace. I'm not worthy of writing a book.
So that's a great question, Phil. Anybody can write a book, and I will tell you there's different ways to write a book because you could use a ghostwriter. You could do it yourself. It may take longer, and I did it through a unique path, and I'm an outsourcer. I'm a delegator. And so I knocked my book out in 4 months. And I used a firm in Chicago, and I worked with this firm, and it was Fig Factor Media. I'll give Jackie Camacho Ruiz a plug. She was awesome and helped me with every aspect. But I did my research. I talked to ghostwriters and all different types of people that said you could do it yourself. And then some people I said that did it themselves. They said, "Oh, I could have used a ghostwriter." And so I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I will tell you, I used a ghostwriter in my own words. It was a very unique process that we agreed to, where I was very involved and I was interviewed while I was driving about each chapter. We had it all planned out. I knew what I wanted, but it had to be in my words, and everything was captured, and I added pages on my own, re-edited. It was a very cool process. I could not have written it solely myself. It would sound terrible. Anybody could write a book. It does cost some money, but there's unique ways to do it.
Larry, I do believe, going through this process that everybody at least has one book in them, whether or not they've got the intestinal fortitude to carry it across the finish line is really in their control. We're running out of time, but I wanted to go one last question and talk about what are the options in getting published? Once you've got the draft and it edited and everything, which avenues did you take and why?
Well, I want a one-stop shop. And so I know there's different ways to do things. I just talked to someone that did crowdfunding to get his book done. And, so there's unique ways to do things, if you don't also have the money. But I use one firm to do it all because I didn't know how to get myself on Amazon and do the Kindle and getting the book out there. I needed someone to help me. I am an outsourcer, so I think, I give a lot of praise to people that do it all themselves, start their own LLC publishing company and do it all themselves. I give you a lot of credit. Never could I do that. But I did talk to a lot of different people and got quotes for a lot of money and a lot of effort. I wanted to get it out. I didn't want it to linger. And so that was my pathway.
Larry, thanks so much for joining us today.
22 minutes goes by fast, and we could probably talk about this for at least another hour, but I want to tell people, if you haven't got an opportunity to get Larry's book, The NCG Factor, and you don't even have to be in career transition. You could be just coming out of college. You can be in a career and want something better. This is a great book for your entire career, not just job transition.
Thank you, guys. It has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Larry.
All. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you.
No, and I think it's really important to stress, George, that the topics, just like in your book, in Larry's book, The NCG Factor, it's life skills. It's not that you want to be a savvy, slick networker or have the most connections on LinkedIn. It truly gives you a great template to meet and connect with people and develop lifelong relationships with people, which I think is the huge takeaway for me.
Yeah, I make it an effort. If I'm connected with somebody, they reached out to me and I'm traveling or whatever, I try to at least identify 2 or 3 people that I'm connected on LinkedIn, but I've never met. Just recently I went out to New Jersey and a guy that I follow passionately, he's got his own marketing company, Joe Applebaum. Great guy to follow on LinkedIn, always inspirational. And I got a chance. I took an hour and a half to drive to meet him for a 30-minute. I mean, it was totally, I was told him, I said, I've been LinkedIn stalking you for about a year and a half.
That's fantastic. George, one last note before we wrap the show, and thank you again, Larry. Larry's book is available on Amazon.com, or you can even visit his website at kaufman.larry.com. As we talked about Larry's experience writing a book, George, what is the biggest takeaway that you've had, biggest impact that the book's had on you since it published?
People that you wouldn't have met alive or beyond the pearly gates, reaching out and saying, hey, you know what, your book helped me and made an impact, and to me, you just can't put a price on that. A gentleman reached out in the beginning of January all the way from Australia and said, hey, I was connected to a gentleman in Minnesota, saw him comment on something, I went out and got your book, and it really helped me set my schedule, my day to be more successful in job transition. And I was like, wow, right? I mean, I'm like, you made my entire year and it's only like January 12th.
I really think the NCG Factor and Hired, Cut Your Career Search in Half, your book, are really great complements to each other. They really work hand in hand. So again, thank you, Larry, for joining us this morning. We know you're very busy, and thank all of you for joining us this morning. We're the first and third Saturday of the month. We'll be back again on the third Saturday of August, talking about internal transition systems, building your bridges across your organization. So maybe you're not in full job transition and unemployed right now, but you want to move to something better. We're going to talk a little bit about that in 2 weeks.
Absolutely. Hey, Phil, have a great weekend and try to stay dry.
Have a great weekend, everybody.